right, we're in 2 John, think about verse 10. All right, 2 John. So we're looking at this letter, most likely written by John to a specific congregation, elect lady most likely, has reference to a church, a congregation, and we talked about house churches and kind of how some of those things operated. And I think one of the interesting things, or to me, one of the most interesting things about 2nd and 3rd John is we get a real insight into how the first Christians operated. What was their life like? And, you hear people say a lot of things about what their life was like and how they operated and how they did things. And it's real easy to say stuff, and it sounds good. It's another thing to actually be able to reconstruct it, right? The hard part comes in the how do you know that? And so these letters help us to kind of get a glimpse inside of their world and in their culture, which is still these cultural ideas are still very much present in the Mediterranean world. And of course, that's what we're dealing with. And so if we're dealing with Ephesus and in that surrounding region, so Turkey, modern day Turkey. And so that becomes very important as we understand and try to understand what's going on and how the church in the first centuries, how they dealt with hospitality, why hospitality was such a big deal, and how it continued to be so for quite some time. And we have a lot of, they're called patristics. All that is, the Greek term for father is pater, patristics, okay? We call them church fathers. That is, we have a lot of writings from Christians in the early centuries of Christianity. And so when we look at their writings, we're not looking at them because we think they're authoritative. We're looking at them because the New Testament has stopped at the year 100, and they give us insight into things that were transpiring after that. And so we're looking at them for all different types of things. But the fact that when you look at them and you look at their writings from the 1st and 2nd and 3rd centuries, and you see what the Didache, which is a 2nd century document, what it said about this, or Ignatius in his writings, what he said about it, and how he said we should handle situations of a preacher coming to town. And this was a pretty significant issue in the life of the early church. And so 2nd and 3rd John, while they are small letters, they would have been actually, it would seem, somewhat important to the life of the early church in figuring out how to handle, how do you know who is who, and how do you know who to help and support. So when we think about this particular letter, again, written to this church, let's just read it again because it's not very long, it's just 13 verses, and then we will pick up around verse 10. It says, "The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace will be with us from God the Father and from Jesus Christ the Father, Son, in truth and love. I rejoice greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. And now I ask you, dear lady, not as though I were writing you a new commandment, but the one that we have had from the beginning, that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk according to his commandments. This is the commandment, just as you have heard from the beginning, so that you should walk in it. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. For whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. Though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face so that our joy may be complete. The children of your elect sister greet you. Okay? So where we're picking up, he's still dealing with, remember we talked about this possibility being a cover letter, or it's certainly sent to one particular church to address a specific issue to them. And we're still dealing with the people who have broken away from Christianity and are denying the deity of Jesus. Okay? The question is, do we show them hospitality? And we'll define hospitality a little bit more as we progress. And so, if they don't abide in the teaching of Christ, and so when we talked about that, that's a phrase that can be taken one of two ways. It's either the teaching about Christ, okay? It's a prepositional phrase, or in the original language, it's a genitive. And so, is it basically saying the teachings about Christ or the teachings of Christ? That's basically the difference in the two, and there's some significance in those differences. And from everything that I can tell within the context, especially the overall writing context, I think it's dealing with the teachings about Christ. I mean, that's what's been in discussion, okay? And so anyone who does not abide in the teaching of Christ, that is, doesn't live in and doesn't accept the deity of Jesus, they don't have God. And that's the point he's getting at. You can't deny his Son. I mean, just think about what Scott read in 1 John 5 when it said, if you deny the Son, you've made God a liar, because God said, he's my Son. And so we are looking to that. And then in verse 10, he says, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting. For, and here's the reason why, whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works. So if anyone comes to you and doesn't bring this teaching, that is, you've got these, they're called itinerant preachers. And itinerant preachers are what we would consider today to be like traveling preachers, missionaries. They're not clean lines on that, but pretty similar. They are going from town to town preaching. So if one of them comes, and he comes into one of their churches, he comes into one of their assemblies and says, I'm the same, I'm a Christian just like you are, but yet he denies the deity of Jesus, well, that's something we're going to have to think through, okay? So let's think about hospitality. And so I mentioned it, I think at the end. It's been a couple weeks since we've studied, so I'm trying to remember. So in these cultures, they are extremely suspicious of strangers. Their notion of the transference of evil, okay, is what we would consider to be highly strange. I told you about, we were in the Bahamas, and Brooke bought this bracelet, and it has these eyes on it. Okay, it's a decorative thing. It's not a hideous looking thing, but if you look in a lot of these cultures where this type of mentality exists, you have an eye in it. That's why really a lot of our jewelry, okay, comes out of this notion of how evil is transferred in the Mediterranean world. And that is that evil is transferred from body opening to body opening. Okay, they don't have to make contact. But so if I look you straight in the eye, I can transfer evil. If it's in me, I can transfer evil from me inside of you. Okay, that's why in Galatians 3 and verse 1, it's translated, "Who has bewitched you?" Okay, it literally reads, "Who's given you the evil eye? Who's transferred this evil inside of you?" Okay, and so any body opening, whether it's through your eyes or through your nose or through your ears, evil can be transferred. And so if you have jewelry on, if you have things that if the sun hits it and glistens, it might catch their attention and they might look at it instead of looking directly in your eyes. You're wearing this to protect yourself because hopefully it detects the attention of the person that carries evil within them, and they don't look at you directly in the eyes and thus transfer their evil to you. Okay? People say, this is really strange. I get that. I'm not saying that this is right. I'm saying it's how they believed and how they still believe. And that's why you can purchase in all of these Mediterranean locations, you can purchase basically an evil eye, something to turn people's attention away the evil will be transferred to it rather than to the individual. So, with that kind of suspicion, okay, now if you can understand that concept, it completely changes the way you read Acts. Why would it change the way you read Acts? Well, what is Paul doing? He's going from city to city to city to city in an entire culture that is suspicious of strangers, especially of strangers who come in teaching things they've never heard before. Do we listen to him? Do we trust him? Okay. So, then as we think about how these early century communities operated, okay, so when we hear the term hospitality, we mean like to be hospitable, like we maybe you came to our house, or maybe we ate together, or maybe you spent the night at the house, or something along those lines. And that's somewhat, but it's really not fully what hospitality is when the Bible speaks of it. So in hospitality, biblically speaking, you didn't have hotels, many, okay? The ones that you had were not trustworthy. They were not safe. So you would stay in people's homes. And in some cities in the Greco-Roman world, they would have registers in, I guess, what would be considered like our courthouse or something, where you could go and you could find people that were favorable to stay with. Okay? So you would go, and the person would be responsible for housing you the whole time, however long that stay would be, and it was usually not just one night, but they would house you, they would feed you, and as Christians took this practice and used it with their missionaries, they not only housed you and fed you at their expense, but they also footed your bill to get you to the next location. Okay? This is why Paul will say in some of his letters, I'm coming to you, and I hope that when I come to you, after I've spent time with you, you will send me on my way. What he means by that is, with hospitality, you're going to help me, provide me with a place to stay, you're going to feed me, and you're going to help me financially make it from one location to the next. Now, as Americans, we would consider this to be an imposition. Like we would look at Paul and say, you're a deadbeat, you need to get a job. Well, he had one, okay? He was a tent maker, he was a skilled guy. But this is the way they operated. Now, there's one other element to this. When you welcomed them into your home and took the responsibilities, you were also signaling to your whole community that this person could be trusted. Okay? You are signaling to the whole community that this person can be trusted. And so, I forget exactly, maybe I have it written down. One writer described this process where you go, I don't see it anywhere. It's basically where you go from a stranger to being an honorary citizen of the city. You become accepted, okay? So why do we go through all that? Well, a couple of reasons. The first of which is it helps us to understand what 2 John 9 through 11 is really about. Because there are people, and I have heard them argue it. Okay? Jehovah's Witness come knock on the door. Can we study the Bible with you? No, I can't let you in my house because you don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. That's not what this means. It's not even close to what this verse means. Okay? But we get into these notions, well, you can't have this person in your house because, they not only believe false things. Well, I mean, if this is true, you can't ever have someone who doesn't believe in God in your home. You can't you can't have hardly any interactions if you take this. But it's a complete, I hate to even go down that road because that idea of thinking is so foreign. It is so off from what John is actually talking about. I don't think it really, I don't really want to give it a lot of attention because that's not what it's talking about. And I honestly don't know that we have a perfect parallel today for the circumstances that they were facing. I've tried to think on and off again about a situation that would be like a modern 21st century American Christian church comparison. Because I don't know that it's there because their communities were so tight-knit. Okay? And, but there is a principle that we have to operate with. We see it in the negative sense here, and we'll see it in the positive sense in 3 John. And that is when we help missionaries, we are working together with them. And so if we help one who is doing something that is wrong, and we know it, then in God's eyes, we bear a sense of responsibility for that. Now, on the flip side of that, when you get to 3 John, if you're helping people that are doing the right thing, God also, and not only in 3 John, but also in Philippians 4, God's viewing it as you're doing it too. Okay? So, sometimes when some missionaries, not all of them, some missionaries will come and give mission reports, and many of them, I won't say many of them, but I've sat through many of them, where they will basically scold the congregation who is helping them because they're not doing what the missionary is doing. Yeah, but that's not how God sees it. God sees it if that congregation is helping to financially support the individual to do what they're doing, then they are just as much involved and just as credible as the person who is doing it. And so, it's an important principle on that side, I think. So, don't bring him into your house. Don't give him any greeting. And the idea behind the greeting is welcoming him, the idea of wishing him well. Okay? Because the truth of the matter is, if you're going around and telling people, look, I in good conscience could not wish a person well who was going around telling people Jesus was not the Son of God. I can't do that. Because I don't wish them well in that endeavor. I don't hope they're successful. I don't want them to be successful in trying to convince people that Jesus is not God. That's everything my life is built on. So, the sense of the idea behind this of welcoming them into your home and giving them greeting is the idea of supporting and promoting and encouraging other people to listen to them. Okay? Now, I'm not going to dive into all of this, but I will say to that principle, even that principle can be abused to where if you disagree, and there are plenty of people who do it, if you disagree with someone on any point, well, then you must completely dismiss them. You must completely keep your hands away from them. You must, you can't be involved with, well, I'll tell you, in my world, I've had people tell me I couldn't read books that weren't written by members of the church because these are people who are promoting things that are not correct. That's not what this means. Like, it's not even close to what this means. Okay? And so it's a principle, and as with things in Scripture, as with principles, you have to hold them in tension. You can't run to extremes because you end up being a knucklehead in the process. Okay? And you end up pushing something further than what its original intention was. Okay? So, that is that particular concept in that particular local church. This is a negative example of what to do, or what to do when you confront someone on the wrong side of it, and then 3 John we'll see an example of what to do on the right side. All right? So this basically is the main reason why he's writing the letter. He's trying to help them to understand this is what we should do. Okay? And then he says in verse 12, though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face, so that our joy may be complete. So I've got a lot more I want to say, but I'd rather not use paper and ink. And the paper, of course, they're using is not paper in the sense we would think of it. It's papyrus. It may be parchment or vellum, which is an animal skin, but most likely papyrus. Papyrus is like a stalk or a reed, and you take it and you slice it, and then you begin to peel the layers of it, and then you run strips horizontally one way and then strips vertically the other way, and has natural sugars within it that force some kind of a process. I'm no scientist, of course. Some kind of a process that makes it come together, helps it to be sturdy, and it becomes the main writing medium of the time. And so he's using that, and of course the pen. I mean, he's not using a cross fountain pen. He's using a stalk or a quill or something along those lines, dipping it in ink. But the bigger portion is he says, I hope to come to you and talk face to face. The original reads literally mouth to mouth. Okay? Face to face is just kind of an Americanized way of saying we're going to have a face to face conversation. But mouth to mouth is actually what the rendering is. And I think there's an important principle there. There are, especially in an age of mass communication, and I have no desire to dive into that discussion tonight, especially in an age of mass communication, we have lost the ability to sit down across from someone, to look them in the face and talk to them, whether it is to say things in a good way that should be said, or to say things in a negative way that should be said. Okay? Look, people say, well, you can talk on the phone, you can text, you can email, you can do all these things. Look, here's the thing. The majority of communication is nonverbal. Okay? That's not me making that up. That's people who study communication. The majority, and by that I mean like 93% of it, is nonverbal. I forget the exact numbers, but it's somewhere around the 40% is your body language. The next 40% or so is the tone in which you speak, the cadence and the rhythm. Because there are things, and look, if you've read a message, I mean, I could read a message from someone and think, well, I don't really know if they're just telling me something or if they're really telling me something here. Like, or there are just so many things that cannot happen, okay? And in a situation, sometimes people ask, what do you do? Well, the answer is, I don't know. So much of communication is learning to read, right? You have to read the room, read the situation. What is the body language? Are they tensed? Can you see them tensing in a way, or trying to relax themselves? Or are they in a laid-back position? Or are they cheating because they know if they can put their body in a laid-back position, it's likely to calm their mood as well? What is the tone? What is the sharpness? How is the delivery? that's something we have to learn how to have. We have to learn how to communicate those things. Again, not just negative, hard conversations, but positive conversations. You want to know an amazing phenomenon? That it is sometimes impossible to get a husband and a wife to look at each other in the face and to honestly look in the eyes, tell them how they feel about each other. Look, that's a problem. That's a problem. On the same side, in this situation, I think he's probably got some other things that are going to be pretty hard to say. And there are some things that you need to say them in person. You just need to say them in person. For all the communication reasons, and because there's just something, treating people with dignity. I'm here and I'm going to talk to you about something, and it's going to be awkward and it's going to be difficult. But listen, even if a person comes at me and they're attacking me and I don't even think they're right in what they're saying to me, let me tell you something. If they have come to me and they have sat down with me, my respect for them is through the roof. We may not agree on the issue, but my respect for them is through the roof because I know they've got guts. I know they've got some moral fortitude to know and to treat people with dignity, to go sit down and say, we're going to do this face to face. We're going to do it the right way. Okay? And a whole lot of conflict in churches would be resolved. And I'm telling you this as a person who's been on the wrong side, who had an issue, didn't take it to the individual when I should have confronted it the second it happened, or not. You know what I mean by that. I'm using a little hyperbole. I should have handled it when it happened. I should not have let it go. And then 2 years later, it exploded into something that if I would have just handled it, and I almost did, and then I backed off and thought, no, I'm just going to let it go. And people say, well, it's just kind of odd and uncomfortable. Yes, it is, but I'm here to tell you from experience, what's a lot worse and a lot more uncomfortable is sitting in a room with someone and they're yelling at you and screaming at you and accusing you of things. And if you had just gone to them 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't be in this, we may not have been in this situation. Or constantly trying to figure out, what are our terms? I mean, do they like me today or do they not? Like, that's just a miserable way to live. And that's not just, people say, well, we're talking about 2 John. How is this talking about things of Christianity? Christianity is about learning to live in community and relationship. And you got to do the things many times you don't want to do. But isn't it interesting? Because what happens is we can break off into our groups and someone says, yeah, you're right to be offended, and everybody gets you hyped up, and then you blow the situation. I mean, good grief, somebody didn't speak to you, and all of a sudden, 2 weeks later talking to people, it's like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And by the way, if you have friends like that who want to amplify situations, you need to stop listening to them. You need to stop telling them problems. They are not your friend. They are not helping you. Okay? True friends, true Christian friends are the ones who will say, look, if you want to vent to me and be frustrated, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you and I both understand what needs to happen here. And you need to go sit down and you need to go talk to that person. Not create this whole dramatic circle that can't be undone. And so John, and this is not the only time he's going to say it, he's going to get it again when it comes to 3 John. where the conflict is going to be very real. And we're going to be dealing with Diotrephes, and he's going to come and confront that. But he says, I come to you and I want to talk to you face to face so that our joy may be complete. We've got about 3 minutes or so. So that our joy may be complete, which is something he said at the beginning of the first letter, 1 John 1 and verse 4. And I think that's an important statement too, that our joy may be complete. They like each other. They actually like each other. They actually like being with each other. And look, society, you can study the way society has changed, how we've gone from a front porch society to a back porch society. We can look at the analytics. We can talk about what all that means, and we've become more restricted and cut off and privatized. But I'm going to tell you, and I'm not a gloom and doom guy. I don't believe that the church is bad. I don't believe it's falling apart. Just a couple weeks ago, I told you I thought the numbers that people were shooting were garbage. But I am going to tell you, if there's one thing that there's one deep and abiding worry I have for the church here, and I have for the church everywhere, it's this. We are content to assemble and huddle and leave and not see each other again until the next huddle's called. That's not church. That's not what God wanted it to be. It's not what He intended it to be. And it's never going to be what He intended it to be. And, you hear people say, well, I want to be a part of a church that people are close. Well, then you have to take some stinking responsibility for yourself. You can't keep looking at everybody else and saying nobody's doing it. You've got to do it. You've got to show up. You've got to be involved. You've got to open the doors to your house. You have to open and break down the walls and let people into your life. Yeah, Christianity doesn't have any effect on some people because the people aren't practicing it at the deepest level it's supposed to be practiced, which is to live in Christian community. That's why Christians recoil. Why would I ever walk the aisle and tell people I've sinned? I wouldn't want people to know it. I don't want them asking what's going on. It's because we don't understand. We don't understand it. And when you look at John and just read the whole New Testament. Acts chapter 2, the first church, what are they doing every single day? What's this word that continually appears? And together, 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 together. That's just in Acts 2:42 through 47. Peter goes in prison. The whole church came together, and they prayed together, and they were together. Look, the church will never die because of outside problems. But if we close ourselves off from each other, we'll die quickly. And that's a sad alternative considering the joy that community really is. And so I hope we'll spend some time thinking and contemplating on those things, and certainly will when we get to 3 John.